So, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody. My name is Paddy Gonzalez, but you can call me Patty. Just don't call me late for dinner. That's all I ask. I want to have a big thank you to Dan and the entire APIsec team for having me. Now, quick about me. I've done a lot of things for a lot of folks, and I've got a lot of NDAs. So I will skip the finer details, but I've been working, building, and delivering software for regulated industries for coming up close to a decade. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I really enjoy the outdoors and getting away from screens. I'm a new dad. I'm new to entrepreneurship, and that's a little about me. But I want to learn about all of you folks. Just a quick show of hands in the comments section. How many of you folks deal with API security every day? Assuming it's going to be a lot, given the audience that we've got right now.
I forgot to mention, Patty, there is like a 10-second delay sometimes. So you might
Oh,
need to wait a little bit for responses from chat if you're polling, just heads up.
okay. Perfect. Thanks, Jesse, for that. I want to say with all of you folks in security, we've heard frequently over the last decade and in this conference itself about how developers need to shift left. We need to move security earlier in the software development lifecycle. We need to bake security into the pipeline. And please don't bolt security on at the very end. And it's honestly become a very important step that's allowed us to move forward with defending against bad actors. It's changed how we design, how we test, and how we release software. But there's a problem statement I want to plug today that even when we shift left, we're building static software. APIs and applications, once deployed, are really just fixed targets. And attackers don't care if we scanned earlier because once that code is live, it sits there waiting to be probed, fuzzed, and is exploitable. So I'd really like to pose a thought exercise today. What comes after shift left? If shift left was about moving security into development, what's the next level, especially in the era of AI threats? That's where the idea of polymorphic software comes in. This isn't a product, it's a paradigm shift for how software itself can evolve, adapt, autonomous, and alive. So, all that to say, what if APIs didn't just deploy and wait? What if they defended themselves? Let's get into it. Jesse, if you move to the next slide. Perfect. What I want to get into is, sorry, moving through the next slide, the shift that's forcing us to think differently. So, again, in the chat, I know there's a 10-second delay, and we can pose this question, but how many of you folks have tested ChatGPT or another LLM to generate a simple exploit just to see if you could? Again, I'm expecting most of you folks have. So, large language models have really collapsed the barrier to entry for attackers. And I don't need to tell this group that. You folks have seen it, you've done it yourselves, and we've seen online a motivated teenager now can ask an LLM to generate malicious payloads, fuzz endpoints, and refine their attacks until something is sticking. So there's really no deep expertise required anymore. That really changes everything. Suddenly, the category of attacker is expanded dramatically. Script kiddies can now run at an industrial scale, and skilled attackers can fast track their pipelines. The sheer volume and speed of exploits has simply skyrocketed. So, the scary part is that cybercrime is projected to cost more than $10 trillion. Sorry, not a million, $1 trillion annually. What a strange concept, strange number to think about. And they're going to be more effective because our defenses are still static. We've entered a world where AI accelerated offense and software built on yesterday's assumptions is not going to keep up anymore. So, Jesse, if you want to go to the next slide for me. Has anyone ever shipped a patch on Friday night and prayed that nothing breaks in production? I hope you haven't, but it does happen. That's life. Where does that really leave us? Most breaches aren't coming from exotic 0 days. They come from the same tired vulnerabilities we all know about. IBM's cybersecurity report in 2023 noted that the average breach costs $4.5 million, and over 70% of breaches exploit flaws that have already been documented. We had that patched, we had the advisory, but we just didn't get it out in time. Or even worse, the patch broke something downstream, or the integration was too fragile. Meanwhile, these attackers are sprinting ahead. The FBI reported 16.6 billion in cybercrime losses last year, 33% jump from the year before. And that's just reported losses. No one likes to actually say, hey, I got hacked. So low skill frauds like phishing and business email compromise dominate. But as part of the Department of Homeland Security's analysis tells us, there's something that is going to get even worse. Script kiddies are evolving. And with AI, they're no longer noisy amateurs. They're automating, morphing payloads, masking traffic, and acting like professionals. That's a real problem. So, what is our current answer in today's paradigm? Just patch faster, add another rule to the WAF, throw more alerts at the SOC. That's what I'm calling the patch treadmill. Patch, 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 while attackers are just sprinting ahead. In my opinion, that treadmill is broken, if not outright dying, which is why I think we all need a different model. So, Jesse, if you can go to the next slide for me. This pain shows up differently no matter where you're sitting, whether you're an executive, you feel it as high risk, cyber insurance premiums going up, compliance fines, reputational damage when your breach makes headlines, not fun. And if you're an engineer, you feel it as burnout, brittle dependencies, late night incident calls, alert fatigue. It's never ending. So two different vantage points, but both very important to this conversation. We're all working to build software and APIs in particular that will live forever in a static state. That brittleness has worked up until a point, but now with AI, that's no longer a winning strategy. We'll dive into enough of the suffering here. So, what if software defended itself? I think that's a great question. What if APIs didn't present the exact same predictable surface every single time? What if workflows, tokens, or logic morphed at runtime in ways that frustrated attackers? I love this. I hate bad actors. The core idea behind polymorphic software that I'm pitching you folks is a blueprint. Polymorphic software is a model for how software leaders might design systems differently in a world where AI driven attackers never stop evolving. Jesse, if you can keep going. So I'm not talking about another gateway, another WAF rule set. I'm talking about a design model, something that we can all start thinking about and changes directly to our build strategy. So polymorphic software is going to have three defining traits. It's going to be adaptive, able to change workflows, interfaces, or even parameterization at runtime. It's going to be autonomous, guided by distributed consensus, not instead of a single administrator with root access, which bad actors love. And most of all, it's going to be secure, not because it's flawless, but because it doesn't stay static long enough to be exploited. So think of this a lot less like a new platform to deploy and more like a North Star. If our APIs and applications are going to survive in the next decade, these are the traits that they need to embody. So where does this polymorphic software take its inspiration from? Just look outside, open a window, go through the door. It's nature itself. Organisms don't survive because they're perfect. And I think that's a real problem that we don't think of as a problem when we build software today, because we look for perfection, right? Whether that's in the UI, UX, whether that's in the back end, we want to start thinking of software as not perfect. We want to start thinking of software as survivable. Our immune system doesn't wait months for a patch at the doctor's office, right? It just adapts instantaneously. So why should we expect our APIs and in the broader perspective, software to behave any differently? So the polymorphic software concept is really borrowing from the same playbook. Instead of brittle code that waits for a patch, imagine software that evolves in the moment, just like biology. So, Jesse, we move to the next slide. So, how do we think about this at a high level? Well, the model has really three pillars. The first pillar is going to be runtime morphability. Systems that shift at runtime, so there's always a moving target. So, for instance, imagine an API that doesn't always expose the same surface, that adjusts how it handles requests in a subtle but important way. The next pillar, front and center, is decentralized trust. Again, no single admin, no single root accounts. Changes should be validated by consensus. This distributes the risk and removes that single point of failure that attackers, again, love to follow and target. And third, entropy-driven defense, injecting controlled variability. It could be rotating keys, morphing tokens, randomized execution paths. The point is that attackers should not be able to rely on predictability anymore. We want bad actors to work harder and fail more often. And I want to point out that these pillars are not features. They're really principles for designing polymorphic software, which, especially APIs, allows for the evolution to stay ahead of adaptive threats that AI is bringing to the table. Jesse, let's go to the next slide. So I'm sure many of you folks feel that you live in the build, patch, break, repeat cycle right now. And that's because APIs are static contracts that attackers are learning to exploit. Introducing the polymorphic software model really flips that script because software now becomes adaptive, self-healing, and continuous. That's really the leap I'm talking about here, is having APIs that evolve through attacks instead of waiting for the next patch window. Personally, I'm tired of living through a reactive patch culture, and I really want us to have living software. So let's stop talking about pie in the sky and let's make this real. In banking, polymorphic software looks like fraud detection APIs that evolve daily so attackers can't lock onto them. In healthcare, polymorphic software looks like patient record systems that self-heal instead of crashing. In energy, polymorphic software looks like grid APIs that reconfigure to stop cascading outages during an attack. And finally, in logistics, it looks like routing systems that adapt to cyber and physical disruptions simultaneously. These are the kind of real world problems that static code struggles with. And it's exactly where I think that polymorphic software as a model should point us forward. So why am I talking about this right now? It seems very future state, not 5 years from now. Well, first and foremost, AI has raised the baseline threat floor permanently. Reactive patching is not going to keep pace. We can get through maybe this year, maybe next year, but things are going to have to change. And secondly, cloud and containerization make runtime morphability technically feasible. We don't need to think of APIs as rigid monoliths anymore, even though that is an easier way to build them. And third, distributed trust models like blockchain technology have finally matured. Look no further than Google Cloud's universal ledger. I think that just came out, the announcement last week, last month. But we finally have ways to govern systems without a single weak point from an enterprise standpoint. So just like the title of this conference, it's really back to school for APIsec. And I want to acknowledge that we finally have tools to evolve how we build software. They're here. In my opinion, this is the moment I like for you folks to start thinking differently about how you build your software, not just shift left. Here's my ask. Start reimagining how you design your APIs and your systems. Ask yourself, how do we make our endpoints less predictable? How do we design systems that don't expose the same attack surface twice? How do we build systems that adapt instead of break? That's a big one there. Because the future, in my opinion, will belong to those who figured those questions out. APIs and applications that evolve will overtake applications and APIs that stay static. It's just a matter of time. And again, this is not science fiction. These are FBI numbers, IBM breach data, Verizon DBIR analysis. These risks are real. The question is, are we going to evolve software fast enough? Last slide, Jesse. I want to close this session out by saying, everyone is going to sleep tonight believing in tomorrow. And if you believe in tomorrow, then believe in today, right here and now. It's important you start believing again, because when you start with that, we'll finally start to see some real change for the future. Thank you, everybody.
The first question I have, Patty, is you mentioned tools that are available now to help with this philosophy that you're talking about. Would you mind talking about some of those tools, and do you recommend any, and what do you use them for specifically?
I think it's more, again, more of a concept. I think the folks that need to create these tools are on this call right now, right? I think the
Ah,
entire concept is very future state, and it's not something that folks are necessarily thinking about, but they
I
have to,
understand. Yeah,
right? Like this isn't something that there's a solution right now that somebody can just plug and play. And I think my description of breaking it down into different industries, right? Banking, energy, healthcare, everybody's going to solve this differently, but they need to understand that the AI threats are real. Like anybody can now just pick up and become a bad actor.
Yeah.
Even my own grandma, right? She doesn't barely knows how to use the internet, right? Ask
Yeah.
GPT, hey, make me a script kiddie. I want to go do this now.
All
It
right.
is crazy.
Dan loves to talk about how he's been turned into a vibe coder by AI, and he's like, I don't know if that's good for humanity or bad, but I'm making stuff. And I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, right? George asks, won't this become an AI versus AI and a polymorphic battle over time? I think it kind of will.
Yeah, I
I
would say
expect
so.
at some level, I expect to see that at least, I would say.
I mean, it's already there, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, again, I can't speak to, everybody on the audience, but folks that are close to the ground know that bad actors are already trying to do exactly that, right? And have AI more in its attack vectors for the software that's currently out there, right? So the threat actors are already doing this. So it's
Yeah.
more of like the good guys, the people who wake up for a living in their 9 to 5s or whatever time you have to wake up. Um, they need to adjust how they're building their software. It's a call to action, really.
Right. Really interesting. Somebody asked, what challenges are you currently facing in Atmosoft as a security guy?
Well, Amasoft is the organization I'm currently partnered with, and luckily we have a big focus, a big presence in logistics, some banking partners, and I mean it's just common everyday problems, right? I think this is not yet bubbled up to a point
Yeah.
where folks are demanding that their software is polymorphic. But we are thinking about how do we have these strategies in place for when folks do start demanding it, because we're running a business here as a dev shop and we can't just on demand pivot and take a loss. So we're exploring
Right.
those strategies currently, trying to figure out what is the best way to move forward, introducing polymorphic systems and strategies inside the software we're currently building and apply those to our clients as needed. This talk is meant to inspire folks to say, how do I need to start thinking about this shift in my given industry? Because everybody's going to have a different way to solve it. And that is key in and of itself to
Yeah.
prevent these threat actors from moving forward, right? If
Yeah.
we have a blanket solution for everyone across the board, then there's one method that they have to solve and break for. But if everybody's going out and thinking of this and building it for their industry needs, then it's going to be much harder. So,
Right. And getting to that point, right, where we do operate like an immune system, like we're going to have to leverage AI for that. I think, just as like a fun pie in the sky example, it might look something like, a WAF right now does a lot, but what if in the future it also advises you on changes you could make in your code based on the type of threat actors that it's seeing? Right?
exactly.
And it could say, "Hey, maybe you should go change the way this auth mechanism works and implement this functionality because you're seeing a lot of these payloads coming and people seem to be sussing out the fact that we're built on X, Y, and Z logic," right? Or something like that. I'm
So,
really
so Jesse,
generalizing here.
you're so close, but let's even think about it that the WAF has control to be able to just execute those changes itself, right? Like
Right.
why even introduce a person, a human being anymore to this equation when we need to start thinking about being proactive in our defense for software? Because the attackers aren't going to. They're not going to wait for somebody to prove a commit.
Right.
It's not the way forward. The biggest thing we're working on right now at Atmosoft and Layer 2 Defense is really private AI. I think enterprises across the board are going to need their own models. I think there's an adoption rate that's super high right now for consumer LLMs, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's using them, but once everybody is finally using them, which is crazy to think about, but they will, we're all pushing the same ideas around, right? So the competitive edge is going to be private AI. And in my opinion, that's what enterprises need to start thinking about. How can I get my own model in my own
Mhm.
environment baked and built on my data? And that's what
Right.
we're working right now.
Well, thanks so much, Patty.